Realities outside of our own always fascinated me because you never know what to expect. Will we face unimaginable horrors, all the cute yet strange entities, or maybe things that we are already familiar with in our universe, but it's completely different through the lens of another? If you had the ability to look or go into another universe, would you do it? Well, if you're interested, then you're in luck because today we'll be exploring the Zooliminology series created by Quiietjay. Not only will we be checking out their YouTube channel, but Tumblr and website. And believe me, this journey will be an exciting and oddly adorable one in which we get to learn more about this fascinating reality called the Far Plane, while also getting introduced to its entities and a group of fun individuals behind the project. Plus, we get to see beautiful, fun, silly art as its visuals, which is always a bonus. I highly recommend checking out the series yourself first. Links are in the description. Even all the voice acting is so much fun to listen to. With that, if you want to take this journey with me, please grab your clipping pens and hazmat suits. It may not be full-out horror, but it's an incredibly charming ride, and as always, I'm your host, Ripa Estrella. Let's explore. Zooliminology videos. First, beginning with the Global Care Guide video, it starts with a warning explaining that the video should only be accessible to Zooliminology project members, or else the defiant viewer will face termination or banishment into the darkest depths of the Far Plane. How lovely. Well, we're not stopping here, so let's just keep going. Now, the video soon welcomes the viewer before proceeding on to explain the standard care procedure for extraplanar entities. Speaking of which, we quickly get introduced to an entity called Globo, which is from an area outside of standard reality known as the Far Plane. We actually get shown a visual of what the Far Plane in our universe looks like side by side, but anyways, Globos are cute little small things with one eye, and I'm already in love with them. And after learning about their physical appearances, we're now proceeding on to learn about their innards. Relax, the entity won't be cut up into pieces. Only a small sample is going to be taken before patching them back up, but honestly, it was still kinda depressing. Anyways, now with the sample and a microscope, we learn that Globos don't have blood vessels, which means they have no blood. Another thing they're lacking is bones, which we can see after they get put through an X-ray. Don't worry, they are immune to radiation poisoning, and from what was researched, it seems like they're mainly made of skin-like materials. Continuing on to the containment procedures, Globos need bathtubs to exist properly and plant matter from the far plains. However, there's been unsuccessful attempts at harvesting the plants there, so reedgrass and dandelions are good substitutes. Once this little nest is prepared, the Globos must be placed inside with its eyes facing the faucet, but don't wash them. Other things that must be avoided is to not hold them with your hands, but instead a tray, so they can still lay flat while being transported. We then learn that organic materials, such as food and water, aren't essential for the Globos' survival, and temperatures surprisingly don't affect them. However, it's still good to keep the temperatures ideal for the plants in their tub, since that's actually something they need, as stated before. By the way, Globos should only be handled for bathtub maintenance and study purposes. As for any information on escape procedures, well, there isn't any. But if Globos are found outside of their designated area, it's recommended to return them back to its enclosure. The credits then roll, and that's the first video on the playlist, a simple introduction to the series for newcomers that definitely sparks interest to learn more about these entities and the Far Plane. With that, let's continue on to the second video, which is titled Longlegs Care Guide, and it begins with that familiar warning message that we've seen in the first video, before proceeding on to obviously introduce us to the entities called Longlegs. And just like Globals, Longlegs are from the Far Plains, but to be more specific, they're from an area called Brutalia. Longlegs are the only entities known to live there, and their size can vary. They can either be gigantic or small little babies. They have a total of 6 legs, and they have 2 dots on their bodies, which are described as markings rather than eyes. Honestly, they almost resemble spiders, and coincidentally, they can climb on walls just like them, so I guess, the comparison is not that far off. But anyways, busting out the microscope, it's revealed that they're made of materials that are highly resistant to damage, and there's no restrictions to their movements. As for a view from the X-ray, there's obviously no bones, just soft innards, and we also get told cutting into them should be avoided or else it will start deconstructing. What does deconstruct mean for a long-legged entity? It's a process in which their legs spontaneously detach and render it inanimate. As for the sample that was used for this video, it was actually taken from one that went through the process, and we see an image of the poor thing. No humans caused this according to the narrator, and it was just like that when discovered. Additionally, the process was not yet observed in person, however a simulation was made, but I guess there was budget problems because the simulation was, well, that. But this moment was honestly wholesome since other voices appeared alongside the narrator, and they shared a good laugh. Now moving on, containment procedures. To mimic its natural environment, the entity is placed inside a windowless room with 1 cinder block, but due to its lack of reactions, more cinder blocks had to be added until 5 were in the room, and they had to stop there to avoid straining the project's budget. Damn. But they somehow got their hands on that target cement sphere, and this seemed to have pleased the entity. Look at it dance, how cute. Anyways, we get told that the entity has no need for food or water to persist, and the enclosure gets regularly cleaned along with having the cinder blocks arranged for moral increase. However, the target sphere should remain in place to avoid issues or injuries. Also, if anyone wants to donate a cinder block, please do. And that's the conclusion to the Longlegs video, and as the credits roll, we get more fun dialogue from the group of people laughing at the simulation. How lovely. Moving on to the next video, it's not one about a new entity, but instead it's an orientation video. And expectedly, it begins with a warning to unauthorized viewers, just like the previous videos, but of course we're just going to ignore that. And the video proceeds to the project's logo and a voiceover from the narrator. The narrator welcomes a new researcher before explaining that their organization is responsible for researching phenomenons connected to other realities. An example of an odd phenomenon is when someone or something disappeared from our reality without a trace, just to reappear later at a random amount of time. Now, most instances could just be because someone was being forgetful, but it's known that there's a possibility for things to slip through the cracks. Speaking of which, anomalies can leak into unpopulated areas in our universe. However, that's less common, and just like with items, they only stick around for a certain amount of time before returning back to their reality. This is all crucial information for the researchers because of course they're going to research and explore the far planes since it's connected to all these strange phenomenons. And for new hires, it's important for them to believe in parallel universes and the unexplainable. Speaking of which, let's finally talk about the far planes. It's a plane of existence located outside of our known universe, and it's made up of matter that takes the form of man-made interiors or exteriors. To list a few examples, hallways, rooms, schools, hotels, anything that a human touched in craft, the far planes is trying to mimic it. Now, how do the researchers access this plane of existence? It's by clipping. To be more specific, they need to create a trans-dimensional bridge, and a tool that can do this is a pen, but the science behind it is a little bit mysterious. Anyways, in the far planes, as we learned previously, there's creatures that inhabit the space that are called entities, and after getting told this, we get introduced to someone named Theta. Theta seems to appreciate the entities and find them both strange and wonderful while also claiming that they are nothing that we've ever seen on Earth. Well, some of these entities do resemble animals or objects from our universe, but I digress. Returning back to the video's narrator, we get told that 9 years ago, a group of scientists went to a redacted place in Switzerland to investigate the phenomenon in which items kept disappearing in a warehouse. This caused an evacuation of the town, but luckily things were soon resolved thanks to the founder, Researcher Alpha, who actually holds the knowledge behind clipping into the far planes by will, and they are the inventor of the clipping pens. We then get told Researcher Theta, the person we briefly saw seconds ago, is one of the original members, and when they first encountered the entities in that reality, the group decided to stick around and make the warehouse their headquarters to begin the Zooliminology project, and since that day, the organization grew in numbers and equipment. We then get to see an interview with Researcher Alpha, however, their face is redacted, and they explain that it was natural for them to look more into the other reality, but the interview soon derails when they get into a brief argument about using codenames. But moving on, the purpose for the project is to understand and to protect the far planes. A lot of information gets collected and transported there, and the researchers need to prepare for the phenomenons because it can easily happen to them. However, new hires can't expect to immediately explore the far planes because they first need to learn anonymity. They need codenames, avoid exposing the fact that they work for the organization when outside, and they need to spend some time in the HQ before they can even step foot or learn about the land and the town. With that, we then get a fast list of things to avoid doing when in the far planes, which honestly seems like a no fun list, but most of these rules do seem to make a little sense if you think about it, but it's still confusing. I would read you the full list, but that would be stealing too much of your time, so moving on. Standards for hazmat suits. Epsilon, another project member, explains that it's encouraged to pick a specific color and to customize your hazmat suit to better differentiate yourself from the other members. Pretty cute, honestly. The reason for this is because everyone must keep their suits on 100% of the time when in the far planes, so to avoid confusion, it's beneficial to make it obvious who's who. As for why they can't take off their suits, it's potentially hazardous in the far planes, and side effects are unknown, so it's better to be safe than sorry. That, and it's also for privacy reasons, which could explain why anyone who has their mask off when in front of the camera has to have a sensor over their face. Anyways, with the power of friendship, or I guess teamwork, the organization can accomplish their goals. Also, we finally get introduced to everyone in the organization. Phi, Tau, Eta, Theta, Rho, Nu, Sigma, Delta, Gamma, Epsilon, Psi, and Alpha. And with that, the orientation video concludes, and the new hire gets told that they are valued as the newest addition to the project, and we roll to the credits. Beautiful. Now on to the final video in the playlist. Prince Care Guide. We ignore the warnings in the beginning as always, then get introduced to the entities called Prince. It's of course from the far planes, specifically they are native to an area called Greenhouse, and it's the same place where Globos originate from. They can be found alone or in small groups, and they are hexapods made of tempered glass. And somehow through the pockets in their eyes they can see, but how their vision works is a mystery because again, they're made of tempered glass. Regardless, they're immune to blunt force trauma, weapons, and chemicals, but shockingly, this immunity doesn't extend to its tail. More on this later. We then learn this entity is very active and their enclosure must take that into account. Speaking of which, the enclosure must obviously mimic a greenhouse from the far plains, but besides that, giving a prince a companion seems beneficial. Now, important things to take note of. When in the enclosure, it's essential to know where the entity is at all times. Additionally, having garden tools in the enclosure is banned, and plants that need to be treated should be taken out until they're healthy again. As for what should happen when a prince escapes, it must immediately be found so it can be returned to its space. Oh, and try not to spook or stress out the poor thing. Sadly, even with all these precautions, accidents can still happen, and we quickly discover that the prince's tail is its weak spot because a bit of hard pressure caused the whole entity to shatter. And if you know what a Prince Rupert drop is, you likely figured this out already. So sad. But don't start mourning yet, because when a prince shatters, they turn into a queen. A slippery, glowing, and flying entity that looks like shattered glass, but they're harmless to the touch, and because they can easily go through doors and windows due to their ghost-like forms, containing them isn't an option at the moment. And they are honestly a bit weird since they stalk people in their sleep, but anyways, if a researcher wants to look more into the queens, they have to actively seek them out to do the research. They seem to favor dim and dark areas, so that's a start to where they can be found. And with that, this is the conclusion to the guide for the Prince and Queen entity video, and we roll to the credits. Wasn't that nice, learning about this project connected to a reality outside of our own, and its own strange wildlife? Well, we're not done yet, because as I mentioned before, there's a website and Tumblr with more information, so let's clip ourselves over there. Zooliminology Tumblr plus website. On Quiietjay's Tumblr, a lot of questions from curious fans get answered, but for the sake of not taking too much of your time, I won't go through all of it. Again, links are in the description, check it out if you're interested. So starting from what I believe is the very beginning, we see a photo of a herd of wild entities, and from that point forward, we see more photos of the entities along with their locations. Most of these entities are familiar, and others are new. More on this later. And while looking through the posts, we learn that there's transitional areas in the far plains. Clipping and getting transported is one method of traveling, but walking is an option, and you can go to the borders, which we see an example of with Brutalia and Greenhouse. Pretty fun, it's like a fusion of the two locations. Also, look at this area in the far plains, a suspicious staircase in the middle of the woods, and it turns out the entities are mimicking the fallen leaves around it! Ooh, the unusualness to this classic formula always unsettles me. Like, why is there stairs there? This is not even supposed to be scary, sorry. Anyways, let's now talk about the members of the project. They get a lot of work done when exploring these lands, and sure it can get dangerous when doing science, but they're having fun and we actually get a better look at their appearances and learn what their specific jobs are. There's also seemingly other members we didn't get introduced to in the orientation video, but regardless, as mentioned before, they have their specific jobs that either involve behind the scenes work or more hands-on action with the other reality. For instance, Thea is the zookeeper, which we can assume they are responsible for interacting with and doing caretaking for the entities, which is pretty obvious since we do see Theta with the entities in that video. Also, can I just quickly say how in love I am with their hazmat suit designs? It's so fun and adorable for some reason. It kind of opens the door for people to make their own OCs. Also, I think it's pretty neat that they use the Greek alphabet for the code names. So cool. But anyways, for a project that's so dependent on privacy, why is all this information being posted on videos and blogs? Well, the privacy seems to mainly be in the case for the workers' identities, and obviously keeping the equipment used for traveling is heavily guarded, but sharing the information on the far plains itself is seemingly fine, and according to Sai, it serves as a valuable educational research for people keeping up with the project. However, they are still going to keep most information confidential. They want their project to be understood, but obviously there's limits to what they can share. And remember the video's warnings about termination and banishment into the darkest depths of the far plains. The members aren't here to play, they take their job seriously, and since it involves another reality, of course it's gonna be taken seriously. With that, let's now move on to the website, which is run by Intern Pi, and we're better to start than with the About section. I'll read it in full. Zooliminology is a project created to explore the surreal aspects of liminal spaces and create hypothetical fauna that could live in them. This project is created explicitly to avoid horror tropes that commonly are found in liminal art and media nowadays, and aim to use the more surreal, strange, and sometimes silly aspects that can be found in liminal spaces to have a different spin on the genre. Zooliminology provides a gallery of artwork exploring different places and creatures in the far plains, a plane of existence found outside standard reality. I like that description. It's good to take a break from all the horror aspects in life and get introduced to something more silly and cute, but that's still a little misleading because some of these entities are kind of creepy, or the members in the project do or say things that make me feel a little nervous. I could just be paranoid because I have trust issues, but sometimes I wonder if it's really all that innocent. But let's just relax and look into the location and entities that live there. There's the Far Plains, Brutalia, Greenhouse, Game Zone, Mariana, the Rain Lot, and Winter. The primary location is obviously the Far Plains, which is commonly the first place people clip into, and it's a vast open green space that is the home to striders, kites, and max. There's also large black monoliths known as gateways, which are scarcely scattered throughout the area. Both striders and kites coexist with each other, and striders almost resemble Brachiosaurus, while kites resemble, well, kites, but kind of aquatic. As for what a max is, they're clown-like flying creatures that come in 3 colors. They're friendly to humans, so don't worry about them, and they like to travel in groups. Next up, Brutalia, which we were already introduced to and is the home to Longlegs. It's made up of mainly random concrete structures, and unexpectedly the sky seems to be in a perpetual state of sunset. How lovely. Another area that we're familiar with is the greenhouse, which is made up of buildings with fauna, and it's primarily the home to Globos, princes, and queens, which we already learned about. Let's now move on to the locations and entities that we're unfamiliar with, and let's start with the game zone. And as you can probably guess, this location is a space that resembles a fun area like an arcade or an indoor park with high ceilings, and the creatures that inhabit the space are called sockworms. They like to take shelter in the ball pits, and they can stretch indefinitely. This seems like a nice place on paper, however the concerning aspect to this is the fact that it's dark. Next up, the Mariana, a dimly blue-lit space similar to an aquarium with empty large inaccessible tanks filled with pseudo-fluid/fauna, and the entities in the area are Mish, night skies, and spoons. The Mish avoid other entities and float in the air. Night skies are very similar to those glow-in-the-dark stickers that are placed on the ceilings, which coincidentally they can be found on the ceilings. And lastly, spumes, which are comparable to bubbles and are usually found in small clusters. Now moving on to the Rain Lot, it's perpetuously dark and constantly raining with light flooding in most areas despite its flat land, and the only entity recorded there are called ghosts. And according to their characteristics, they have malice in their eyes, which, alright. Besides that, they seem to not pay any mind to the environment they're in. However, at some point they did go under the photographer's umbrella, which I guess is kinda cute. Also, you can probably guess that they look like children with sheets over their heads, but obviously it's not a costume, and the name Ghost is honestly pretty fitting when you look at them. Next on the list, which is the final location, Winter. Similarly to the Rain Lot, it's perpetually dark, and instead of raining, it's constantly snowing. Not only that, but it seems to either be in a constant state of sunset or sunrise, or fully at night. Additionally, it's pretty misty with plant life that doesn't grow or decay, and the entities who inhabit the space are called fogwalkers or light mimics. Fogwalkers are arguably one of the more unsettling entities in my eyes, and they have these long tendrils with footsteps that can't be heard because it's theorized that they can walk upon the clouds and fog in the space. This basically means it can easily sneak up on you if you're not looking up, and that freaks me out. But maybe I'm just being too mean for no reason, I'm sorry. Anyways, as for the light mimics, they resemble Christmas lights that can shift their position, and based on the image, they seem to cling on to homes, but I can't help but feel paranoid because I feel like they can wrap around a person like a giant snake and suffocate them. Sorry, I still have horror in the brain. I should calm down. But come on, dark spaces and mysterious entities spook me, okay? Actually, speaking of spooky, the portal entity. This one has the most unclear information about it, like its location and size. However, it's been described to cause things behind it to appear dilapidated and shadow-like despite its transparency, and it moves away when approached. How random. And that's all for the website and Tumblr. If it seems like I went through the information fast, it's because the information isn't as extensive as in the videos, and I didn't go through the Q&A where you can usually find the most information. So if you're interested, again, links are in the description. But with that, let's now move on to the conclusion. Conclusion. Silly fun entities in an odd yet exciting reality that's right next door to our own. If we lost an item, maybe we lost it, or maybe it was temporarily taken to a separate reality because there's cracks that can leak through. But don't you worry, because there's a group of individuals in hazmat suits that are putting in the hard work to research as much as they can about the Far Plains and its entities. Along the way, they snap photos and make videos to better share the information on this reality. We may not know each of these individuals fully, however, a lot of their charm and personality still peeks through, especially during the orientation video, and the entities, though odd, are interesting to learn about and are honestly adorable that you can't help but let your guard down when around them because really, they don't seem that harmless. Potentially. They could be wolves in sheep's clothing, but again, I'm just a paranoid person, so I should stop thinking this way. Like, come on, look at Globos. I love those things. With that, this is the Zooliminology project created by Quiietjay. Again, the links to everything are in the description. Clearly, a lot of heart and hard work was put into this project, and each visuals we get shown is so eye-catching that it would be a darn shame to not enjoy each art piece. Plus, voice acting was so good and charming that I couldn't help but have a smile on my face throughout each video. From the narrator to the other members in the group, I just want to learn more about them. Honestly, my curiosity for the other reality and its entities is on the same level as my interest and curiosity for the members in the group. I want to know more about them and see what they do. In addition to that, even the editing was fun. Again, a lot of heart was put into this project, so I highly recommend checking it out and keeping up with it in the future. With that, this is the conclusion to today's video. Since you made it this far, I hope that means you enjoyed it, so please don't forget to like, subscribe, do the funny little notification thing, maybe follow my other social medias, leave a comment, and I better not catch you dying on me. Goodbye! This is a huge breach of security. I spent 3 hours finding people standing in natural positions and taking photos of them without their consent. Okay.